Then you have the mythical white moderate, okay? The white moderate running an incredible show here, okay? Michael from Pennsylvania calls it out. Welcome Fest is happening in D.C. right now. And the neoliberal entities within the Democratic Party that have caused all of the Democratic Party's ineptitude and failures and lack of popularity overall are once again at the forefront of the Welcome Fest. Third Way, Blue Dog Pack, New Dems, Inclusive Abundance. Okay, they're here and they're putting on an incredible show, ladies and gentlemen. They're here to stay. I know Jean-Pierre also has left the Democratic Party. We'll talk about that in a second. But here is Welcome Fest. Alex Bronzini Vendor is there, freelance writer for the Baffler Mag, Guardian, American Affairs. And this is the largest public gathering of centrist Democrats, all 8 of them. Okay? Laksha Jain starts off by saying, the voter you're trying to win over is a soccer mom who isn't really as concerned with the election on Tuesday as she is with her kids' soccer semifinal on Saturday. Citing Democratic lawmakers' visit to El Salvador, Matt Iglesias argues that the groups create bad incentives for Democrats. So, like, he is saying that the ACLU and all these other bad advocacy groups that are firmly within the Democratic Party structure, okay, that have their own unique interests and try to constantly push the Democratic Party in the right direction, they're actually bad for the Democrats. The Democrats should actually avoid working with them. Ironically enough, these guys personally love how the Republican Party operates, and the Republican Party is nothing without its incredible instruments, okay? Whether it be the media ecosystem that they've designed that goes all the way from the independent outlets all the way to mainstream outlets, okay? Whether it be all of the sophisticated media ecosystem that the Republican Party has designed, or the think tanks that they have created, where they constantly focus group test whatever kind of messaging that they should be following with, whatever kind of messaging that they should be continuing with, in an effort to push for certain points and certain types of policy that are horrible for many Americans, but they try to feed that. They try to force feed that narrative, and they try to force feed that position as aggressively as they can in an effort to ensure that they get a decent amount of positive coverage from that media ecosystem, and also are things that people will push for. A new JCS alert. Okay, I know, man. I know. What do you want me to do? You want me to just watch the new JCS? Why is everybody saying new JCS? What is happening? Huge news. Did you hear Trinity College in Dublin was the first university in the West to fully divest from Israel? I will be visiting Trinity College in the fall. It's unsurprising. Adam Gentleson. People wishing to push the Democratic Party in the correct direction should speak up more on Twitter, where people will pile on you. Representative Tom Suozzi recounts being asked by Dem consultants, why are you talking about immigration? That's a Republican issue. He recalls answering, no, it's what everybody's talking about. That's what they talk about when they go out to a party or a family dinner. He advises candidates in the crowd, you can't let yourself be pushed around by consultants. Ironically enough, these guys refuse to abide by any sort of popularism standards that they have created, that they've cultivated, okay, when it comes to the issue of Israel, because there is overwhelming support for a ceasefire, and yet they never listen to those calls, surprisingly enough. So there's overwhelming support for Medicare for all, and yet they don't listen to those calls. So maybe they have nothing. They have no interest, no investment whatsoever in actually dealing with popularism, okay? And I will tell you exactly why. I'll tell you what they are right about. The Democrats on culture war issues that don't actually touch the pre-existing hierarchies of capitalism are losing, okay? Republicans are destroying the Democratic Party on the culture war stuff. They are guiding the conversation. They are killing it. And because the Democrats themselves don't want to do anything that genuinely changes the pre-established hierarchies, genuinely don't want to do anything that genuinely harms capital owners and their profit margins, because they are they refuse to do anything about that. They want to hyper focus on culture war, but Republicans are dominating in the culture war sphere because that's the whole purpose of culture war shit to begin with. It's a distraction away from genuinely improving the material realities of the American working class. That's why culture war exists. It's purely and utterly reactionary. And if the Democrats don't do anything, if the Democrats don't try to change the trajectory, don't try to actively become a party that is identifiable by certain policies that are incredibly popular, they are never going to be able to win. They're always going to lose because at the end of the day, with culture war narratives dominating discourse, Democrats are ultimately not going to be able to present a strong showing on the culture war front and inevitably yield to the Republicans on specific culture war issues like trans people, immigrants, all this stuff. And then they will give even more leeway to the Republicans on these issues by conceding to their framing. It's that simple. Yeah. And I talked about this extensively. So it's insane that Matt Iglesias is using this as a negative thing. Insane point to make, given that this work, Trump's approval on immigration went into the negatives for the first time while this case was being highlighted. It bounced back since Democrats gave up on it. I have been saying this nonstop. Okay. I use Chris Van Hollen and the 1 week media cycle that Chris Van Hollen was able to create around the issue of immigration by hyper focusing on Kilmar Abrego Garcia and how successful that was in terms of undermining Trump's most popular policy position, which was immigration enforcement. It's so frustrating. Democrats are such gross losers, man. It is, it's really up. Here it is. By a 22-point margin, Americans say they want Abrego Garcia return home. Even bigger margins among moderates and independents. It was one of Trump's worst testing immigration policies, perhaps the worst. I wonder why. Because it was identified. It was hyper-focused on. I don't know how many times I have to repeat myself over and over again. And at the end of the day, I'm only repeating myself to an audience of like-minded individuals. I cannot breach the public consciousness with this stuff, even when it's literally happening in real time. It's so frustrating. It's so frustrating to constantly have to repeat this to an increasingly shrinking audience that is bored of hearing this and is completely and utterly checked out of politics once again until the next insane thing happens, and then they have to tune back in. This is my life. This is my hurdle. Every single day I have to put that boulder up on the goddamn hill only for it to fall back again, okay? Just one more Theo Vaughn appearance, bro. I swear it'll work this time. I mean, I'm not. What do you want me to do? Stop? These people are invited to DC because they tell the rich what they want to hear. Exactly. We all do what we must. We all do whatever we can in the little but albeit meaningful ways. Okay? But it's so frustrating to see the consulting class of the Democrats that are firmly committed to the Democrats being a controlled opposition party consistently denying reality, okay? Consistently denying reality. Education Secretary says Holocaust denialism counts as viewpoint diversity. Linda McMahon is going to great lengths to defend Trump's war on Harvard University. Yeah, I oh my Lord. On the one hand, Holocaust denialism is educational diversity, but if you, God forbid, say anything about Palestinians or Palestine as though they're human, then that is the maximalist anti-Semitism that you can do. There's also this, an outright denial of the abundance explanation in and of itself. In this viral clip, Ezra argued to Jon Stewart that the Democrats deliberately stuffed their rural broadband legislation with process obstacles in order to give local and other organized interest groups like environmentalists a chance to weigh in, and it backfired. Later, the Biden official in charge of the program, Bharat Ramamurthy, said that no, Republicans in Manchin Cinema had insisted on those obstacles at the behest of monopoly internet providers. So the poll asked a simple question: which explanation sounds more plausible? Ezra's story about the groups, or was it the monopolists protecting their own power? It was the monopolies 64 to 19%. It was the groups 36 to 19%. Here's the exact wording. The main reason internet service is too expensive is because the internet service companies have a lot of power, which they use to make sure they can keep prices high and block or slow down government action to expand internet access and provide more options. Strongly agree, 29.5%. Some would agree, 34.5%. Some would disagree, 14.3%. Strongly disagree, 5.1%. Unsure, 16.7%. As opposed to, the main reason internet service is too expensive is because organized interest groups and community groups work to block or slow down efforts by government to expand internet access to provide more options. Hyper focusing on these other interest groups as though they are the major pathways, the major hurdles against development is so weird to me. You're missing the forest for the trees almost deliberately. It feels like you are missing the forest for the trees in a deliberate manner. Okay? I'm trying to be as charitable as possible. That's why I said it almost feels like you're missing the forest for the trees in a deliberate manner. Okay? I think it is. It is deliberately hyper-focusing on the least powerful entities in this process. And it feels like Matt Iglesias and the other, famous neoliberal consultants, the famous neoliberal consultant class is now trying to wage war against the ACLUs and the sunrise movements of the world, claiming that their attitude is too pie in the sky, too ridiculous for anyone to actually approach and take seriously. And that, Adam Jenelson, Lakshya Jain, Matt Iglesias, all of these guys have put the crosshairs on the true enemy of the Democrats, which is, of course, advocacy groups. That is what the real problem is here. It's not necessarily the lack of progress by design on a lot of these issues that end up harming the interests of capital. But it's not capitalism itself. It's actually all these advocacy groups that sometimes will make demands that harm the profit motives of these companies. The name of the conference is going on, I think, is Welcome Fest. That's what it is. Yeah, sometimes I get 1 million to 2 million on videos. Tom Swazi at Welcome Fest. Truanon is there. Our roaming correspondent, Brace Belden, is there. Front row, rapidly emptying as Richie Torres and Josh Barrow take the stage. Richie Torres, D-Israel. Sorry, that post has been deleted. Oh, no. Could you imagine if May Musk makes an appearance? What do you think Brace would do? He would... Am I being obtuse? I don't get why both answers are not correct. We know for a fact corporations are slowing down and blocking expansion, but the regulation bloat and minor groups also slow down progress a lot. The reality is both. These morons are ignoring corporations for capitalism. It's kind of like this, okay? It's like this. It's as though you are hyper-focusing on the least powerful entity and avoiding covering the most powerful entity that is a hurdle in front of progress. The American government is supposed to have awesome power, and therefore, the American government is supposed to have awesome power, and therefore, local government, state government is supposed to be able to do certain things. But there is one more powerful entity, and that is capital. Capital will always get in the way of new projects, whether it be improving broadband, ISPs themselves. And this, again, is a reality that the average American understands as well, as you can see from this, okay? High-speed rail in California has been a disastrous failure in development, not due to these minor interest groups that have played a major role in blocking high-speed rail from being completed, but because of the incredibly corrupt public-private partnership, okay, and the lack of interest in actually putting together high-speed rail because of what it would do to the existing industries, what kind of harm that would do to the existing industries, without ever factoring in the additional opportunities for commerce. The abundance guys have some points in regards to state capacity. I don't disagree with them that certain federal rules, especially around contractors and litigation, make actual federal action unnecessarily difficult. I need to actually finish the book, though, but I agree. I think they're missing the forest for the trees and not seeing the actual real problem is elite influence over the state, which has caused the restraint itself. I mean, every single ballot that comes out of every single election in the state of California has overwhelming margins for fixing the housing crisis. And then they fundraise to the tune of billions of dollars. And then that money just like gets parked in a fund and goes nowhere. One must ask the question, why it goes nowhere? Well, the real reason is not because of, woke climate change groups that say, oh, you can't build anything, or the random lefty, not in my backyard groups that don't want gentrification. The real reason is because real estate developers don't want additional housing to be built, or if it's going to be built, it must be built in a very specific way that only causes the existing housing inventory to also still go up in price. And beyond that, they never want to actually solve the problem. The real solution is to work towards decommodification of housing. Okay, there is no other solution. That is the reason why capitalists, socialists, whatever form of governance you have, the only places on the planet where there are lower rates of homelessness, okay, lower rates of homelessness and higher rates of home ownership are places that are either post-USSR Eastern Bloc countries or currently in existence capitalist countries like Singapore, where the government owns all of the land. The government owns all of the land and can basically take away your housing. That makes it virtually impossible for you to be a landlord, okay? Singapore is a great example of this. An even better example, obviously, would be China, but a fantastic example also is Austria, the city of Vienna in particular. These are all. Vienna is Vienna has a housing market that is 65% state owned. 65% of housing in Vienna is owned by the state. Is public housing. There are many different ways to solve this problem, but every single one of them revolves around the state basically making it as unprofitable as possible for you to own multiple units and to make money, to generate revenue off of the capital that you own. Private capital, okay? Private ownership of housing that you safeguard. That is what the current government has done. That's what the government has always done. Housing was an incredibly important part of the American dream, and therefore there were a lot of protections for homeowners. There was a lot of there were a lot of initiatives to help people purchase their first homes. And over the course of the past couple of decades, obviously, people have taken advantage of those existing protections to make housing one of the most valuable, one of the most reliable forms of investment. Because housing, on the one hand, is shelter. It's a necessity for survival. But on the other hand, if you both treat it as a shelter and a necessity for survival and offer it additional protections, it becomes the most valuable. It becomes the most valuable, the most significant way of generating value, generating wealth. It becomes your nest egg. It becomes a point that you can use as leverage. It becomes something that you can actually take money out for and take out a second mortgage or whatever. You understand? Referenced by Kaufman. Derek Kaufman of Inclusive Abundance. Abundance is a North Star to create factions on both the right and the left. You can talk about it as a way to combat homelessness in our big cities, and you can talk about it as a way to compete with China. Kaufman, a former hedge funder, says abundance supporters should find like-minded candidates and give them resources to be competitive. Imagine a world where young people aren't thrilled by college Dems or college Republicans and join college abundists. What? A huge contributor to this was also keeping interest rates so low for so many years after 2008. Property became the least volatile and most reliable growth place to park large amounts of money, which is why all the hedge funds and shit started buying it up. Yes. Housing is not an investment. Housing is shelter. Everyone needs housing to survive, okay? Even an animal needs shelter in the wild. And the further you move away from that, reality, the worse the housing crisis gets, and the more homeless people you see on the streets. And the more homeless people you see on the streets, the more you think crime is completely out of control. Because visible poverty is directly associated with crime. That is the reason why you've seen major shifts in blue cities in the direction of the Republicans. This is another incredibly scary this is yet another incredibly scary consequence of refusing to fix the housing crisis. Okay? On the poorest end of the spectrum, you're basically cutting people off from ever having hope or ever having to vote for you because you very clearly don't care about their interests. And on the wealthier side, people that already have their housing, people that already have their life set up, on the older end of the spectrum, okay, people look to the endless amount of homelessness and despair all around them and go, crime is out of control, and our woke-ass libtard administrators are not helping. They're not doing anything. That's it. And it sucks because there is no place in this country where you can actually point to a direct way of tackling the housing crisis in a meaningful way. Okay, houses are still cheap in the Midwest. How do you price in big cities? What? Yeah, okay, little bro. Houses are still cheap in the Midwest. How do you price in big cities? First of all, houses are not cheap in the Midwest as in comparison to how cheap they were 20 years ago, okay, 30 years ago. So you're wrong about that as well. They're just cheap in comparison to how expensive housing is in places like Los Angeles. Okay. What? 20 years ago, housing in Los Angeles was still comparatively way more expensive than housing in the Midwest. I understand that people's conceptualization of wealth and affordability is a relative phenomena. So you actually are constantly matching it up against like whatever you can see. But you are delusional if you think that housing is still cheap in the Midwest. Yeah, cheap as opposed to Los Angeles, but it's always been cheaper in the Midwest as opposed to Los Angeles until climate change makes it uninhabitable. And then people have to rush to move into the Midwest. Okay? My parents in South Dakota bought their house about 15 years ago for about $180K. The same neighborhood houses have going for upwards of $400 to $500K. Yeah. This, for the record, is untenable. Okay? Our interest in supercharged profits and the maintenance of supercharged profits for all of the people that own multiple properties, but also, and this is also significant, for the people that own one property and yet see that one property as a vehicle for upward social mobility. This is unfortunately something that they will never come to terms with. This is something that I talk about quite frequently with Los Angeles, with the state of California. Okay, what's the single home ownership rates in home ownership rates in home ownership rates in California? Home ownership rate California. What is it, like 44%? I think is the second lowest in the country. Okay, not surprising. 55%. In the state of California, 55% of families own their own home. Okay? 55%. That means for 55%, I think in Los Angeles it's even lower. That's why I was thinking like 44%. I believe like in LA, in LA it's even lower. So one thing you have to consider here, okay, is that means 55% of people that own their homes, one, are constantly giving money to the bank because they didn't just like purchase it outright. Okay. They did not purchase it outright. Yeah. It's 47.94 in LA County. Thank you. That's what I was thinking of. So that means that 55% of Californians are, one, paying money to a bank to continue owning their home. Right? And therefore, if their property values decline, all of a sudden, if the decommodification of housing takes place, their property values decline. Now they're paying a mortgage. Now they're paying a debt for a property that is no longer as valuable. If the property value consistently goes up, then at least that debt is fine to pay because guess what? I'm generating value around this thing that I own. It's more valuable this year as opposed to last year, and the value will continuously go up And by the time that like I retire, I can maybe even sell this house and have some money so that I can go and live somewhere cheaper and even leave a little nest egg for my children, right? There's that side of it. The other side of it is that when the value is consistently going up, like I said, it's your retirement fund. For people who own, for 55% of Californians, this is their retirement fund. Yes, I said children. I said children, dumbasses, because who the f do you think owns homes? It's not you. It's your parents. It's your grandparents. Those are the people who own homes, okay? People with children that come from the previous generation when you could do such a thing. Unless you literally lucked out and became a Twitch streamer and were immensely fortunate to be able to be like a one in a multiple million shot lucky, and were able to purchase a home for yourself and your family before the age of 30. For 55% of homeowners, the reason why they are terrified of their property values going down is because this is their retirement fund. It needs to endlessly grow. Okay? They associate intergenerational wealth with home ownership. This is something that will be very difficult to push past. Do you understand? California's YIMBY Abundance faction is advancing a bill, AB 698, that would create a new bottleneck for affordable housing funding measures. This bill would require a legislative body of a city, as specified before it adopts any transfer tax of the sale of real property, to develop and post it on its internet website analysis that examines at a minimum the effect of that proposed transfer on tax, among other things, the production of affordable housing, including affordable housing produced by market rate housing projects. The bill would include findings that changes proposed by this bill address a matter of statewide concern rather than a municipal affair, and therefore apply to all cities, including charter cities. Apparently, this bill is a response to LA's ULA, a 2023 voter-approved tax increase on property transfers over $5 million. Notably, the LA City Council retains authority to reduce or eliminate the tax without further voter approval, including to increase affordable housing production. Existing statutory law enacted by Prop 62, as approved by the voters at the November 4th, 1986 statewide general election, prohibits the local government district from imposing any transaction tax or sales tax on the sale of real property within the city, county, district, except as provided. The California Constitution authorizes cities organized under a charter to make and enforce all ordinances and regulations in respect of municipal affairs. How do we ensure affordable public housing is quality housing? By making the state build it and not using a private-public partnership, but just having a federal guaranteed jobs program or a state guaranteed jobs program with state resources. That's it. And not deregulating. It's just, at the end of the day, I am a broken record on this because all of these problems still go back to capitalism. It's as simple as the profit motive. A lot of people still have the capacity to understand how silly this argument is when you're talking about the Postal Service, right? It's not supposed to be for profit. Not everything is supposed to be for profit. Healthcare is not supposed to be for profit. The Postal Service is not supposed to be for profit. Housing, the building of housing, and the maintenance of housing is also not supposed to be for profit. Okay? There are hundreds of thousands of Americans on the streets while socialist housing policy is working perfectly in Vienna. I know. We are once again repeating this over and over again. It works in Singapore. It works in Vienna. It works in China. It works in places where there is heavy government intervention that stops you or makes it impossible for you to own multiple properties. That's one aspect of this. Another aspect of this would be to curb back on Airbnbs. Because there are different degrees of harm here, all of which revolve around the profit motive. Okay? In America, because we have supercharged our profit incentives, we have endless amounts of different hurdles to clear. Airbnb being one of the immediate ones, okay? Airbnb is a massive problem. And then also on top of that, on top of Airbnbs being a massive problem, you then also have to tackle the issue of people owning multiple properties for rental, like long-term rental properties. It's incredible when you think about it. Like in Singapore, it is not illegal to own multiple properties, but it's virtually impossible to make that a profitable endeavor because of the heavy the heavy taxation that comes along with owning multiple properties. Mike, they have a capitalist city. The only reason they're able to afford this wasteful spending is because of capitalism. The well with will eventually run dry for free things. It's not a hard concept. They've followed this policy for 100 years. Watch the clip, moron.
Recent years have seen land and real estate prices in many European cities spiraling out.
By the way, talking about this unironically resembles talking about Red Vienna reminds me of all of the endless conversations that we've had about removing the profit incentive from healthcare, and how so many other OECD nations have been able to successfully implement socialized medicine and socialized healthcare, and yet we simply can't do it here in America because Americans go, la, 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 I can't hear you. That's not real. That's not a real country. France is not a real country. No way do they have socialized medicine. What the fuck are you talking about? It's actually so much worse. So much worse. Infinitely poorer nations are able to solve this problem when it comes to healthcare. But Americans do not want to hear that at all. They just don't even want to. They just have deluded themselves into thinking, because intelligent people have told them, by associating it with like whatever the they care about. Okay, people just genuinely think that it's not real. It's just not like it's not a reality that exists in the world right now.
Control. To counteract this development, the city of Vienna amended its building code in November 2018 by introducing the subsidized housing zoning category.
It's not really the Americans in general, though, is it? It's the donor and political classes? No, it's Americans as well, because of what I just explained. It's not... The donors are able to break the minds of the American working class as well. Like, it's kind of like how 401ks have basically made it so that the average American worker thinks that they have a investment in the stock market constantly going up, okay, in finance capital. Why do they have this? Why do they have this attitude towards the stock market? Because it's been basically universalized for every single American. Because the reality is, when the stock market is doing well, they are seeing meager gains in their 401ks. When it's doing poorly, they're seeing incredible losses in their 401ks. And therefore, they have associated themselves with the health of the stock market as well. The same thing goes for 55% of Californians that own their own homes. Kyoto recently made a 150% increase on the land value tax for empty homes. As a resident of Japan, housing is very affordable, not only because of a lack of zoning, but also because of public housing for middle class, banning gated neighborhoods, making housing not much of an investment because the property goes down in price instead of going up, strong tenant laws, etc. You need to have both upzoning and regulations. Exactly. But also the other part of it is, from what I understand at least, it's like the weird aspect of Japanese culture that is that dictates that like housing is supposed to be stop colonizing Japan. What? That housing is not like there's this weird attitude towards like not wanting to own someone else's home, right? Like there's not like houses are not built to last, so you're supposed to constantly break down and rebuild housing. Doesn't sound weird. No, I mean, it's just like there's also a cultural aspect to it as well. You feel me? Anyway.
If land is thus classified as belonging to a subsidized housing zone, 2/3 of the usable floor space created for housing purposes must be taken up by subsidized dwellings. This caps rents and safeguards that affordable homes will continue to be constructed across the entire city, and again, ensures a good social mix all over Vienna. All these measures provide for an adequate supply of good housing in Vienna, as well as the rest of Austria. Last but not least, these benefits contribute to Vienna being continually voted the city with the highest standard of living in the world. Vienna was ranked as the most livable city worldwide 10 times in a row. This includes Quality of Living ranking 2019 by Mercer, as well as being classified as the best place to live worldwide by the Global Livability Index 2019 through The Economist. In comparison with other big cities, Vienna has rather moderate rent prices. To maintain this, even in times when the housing market is under great pressure due to the financial markets and the ever-increasing population, the city administration invests, as mentioned, annually roughly 400 million euros in housing construction and renovation of older buildings. With this funding budget, around 7,000 good quality, affordable apartments are built every year, and over 5,000 apartments refurbished on average. Nowadays, the benchmark rent for a well-equipped municipal apartment is €5.81 per square metre, excluding taxes and operating costs. The benchmark rent for a subsidised apartment is nearly the same. When we study how people live, we can determine that Vienna is a city of tenants. Over 3/4 of Vienna's population rent accommodation, with only around 20% living in flats or houses that they own. There are mainly two forms of affordable housing in Vienna: the municipal housing apartments owned by the City of Vienna and the non-profit residential construction buildings owned and operated by non- or limited-profit cooperatives or associations. Already since the 1950s, parallel to the social housing construction of the Viennese municipality, non-profit housing construction has been making a considerable contribution to apartment production.
Do you think Vienna is Venice, chatter? Is that what you think is going on? Do you think Vienna is Venice? Maybe. Japan's cooked. Australia does it better. This ain't it. Australia shits on Vienna housing. Australia has major issues with housing. You are so incredibly wrong. Australia also has massive problems with homelessness. And Vienna is not in Venice. Do you think that Australia is Austria too sometimes? Maybe. Smartest fucking bogan, dude. Oh my lord. Incredible. Put another fucking shrimp on the barbie, mate. Fucking hell. Fucking hell. Arnar. To your point, all you have to say to most Americans is you might not get to keep your doctor, and they immediately become raging fascists. Fuck the poor. We're so screwed. Yeah, Americans are very malleable. They are incredibly easy to manipulate, and that does definitely play a role. That does definitely play a role in the way that the capital owning class will routinely present certain issues in a way. I mean, they spend millions, tens of millions, if not billions of dollars trying to figure out exactly how to communicate these issues in a way that that universalizes the burden, in a way that actually makes people feel as though, in a way that actually makes people feel like it's bad if they get nice things. Genuinely frustrating stuff. Anyway, someone who is invested in solving these problems with state interference and actually puts a dent in this issue a little bit would, I think, would be able to become one of the most historically popular candidates. Would get an unimaginable amount of support. It's also about making people believe, though. Here's Linda McMahon talking about the budget requests.
Very much. Senator Mullen.
Thank you, Chairman. Madam Chair, what's the definition of insanity?
Of sanity or insanity?
Insanity.
Insanity?
Yeah.
Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different outcome.
Right. And what was we ranked in reading and math in 1979?
I'm sorry, what?
What was we ranked nationally in math and reading in 1979?
We were very, very low on the totem pole.
We're number one in 1979. Today...
Oh, in 1979.
1979.
Okay.
In 1979, we were ranked number one in around the world.
What the hell? Is Mark Wayne Mullen base now? What's going on? Yeah, also, that's not the definition of insanity. They're using fucking Instagrammable quotes from entrepreneurs and shit. It's crazy.